white is sheer conquest, and black against and black c4. The sort of, what would you call it, the half-Grunfeld, neo-Grunfeld, whatever it's called, English Grunfeld. Sorry, maybe we got it slightly wrong. So we played check, bishop d7, takes, and this funny move a6. This is all kind of theoretical stuff. I don't want to go into too much. I mentioned it a little bit in the book. The basic point about this position is that black wants to develop normally with bishop g7, white plays e4, and when black castles, white plays e5, and it's kind of awkward. Which is why you play a slightly contrived looking move a6. But one of the main points is after white goes e4, b5, now queen b3, black plays c5. And although he's a bit behind in development, his position is pretty much okay. Because white has compromised his position a bit, so weaknesses on the b file. c4 can happen, knight c6 can happen. Black's okay basically. It's unclear, but black is probably okay. But I was completely shocked when I played b5 expecting queen b3, and Stuart played queen e2. This example is in the last part of the book, and this is in the chapter called Black's Advantage. The genesis of this book was, my intuition that black wasn't really that much worse than chess, that it was a bit overblown, that whatever white's advantage was in theory, it really shouldn't matter that much in practice. And the last part of the book is reflecting on that and trying to develop it a little bit. However, white does have certain obvious advantages. He has some initiative. And the initiative is clearly in action here. e5 is coming, and with it, knight g5 and maybe e6. Moreover, that's just the biggest problem. e5 is coming, where's the knight going to go? How can you deal with that? Well, how can you deal with it? What would you do? If you play a natural move like bishop g7, g5 comes, the knight has to go somewhere awkward. Knight g5 follows up. And then there's issues with queen f3, double attack on f7 and a8. See that pattern? So it's pretty tricky to deal with that. Because we're a bit tight for time, I'm going to tell you what I did and then try and take it from there. I played this move, which doesn't obviously improve matters. It seems a bit bizarre when you're behind in development and you're worried about being flanked, that you should put your bishop back to its original square. But I think it's a very strong move, and by far the best in the position. And it was an important theoretical novelty that actually knocked this line out of business. Not quite out of business, but it made it much less dangerous. So what's the point? Well, I'll go back to here. What is the sort of part of the position? e5 is the issue. White is going to go e5. What's black going to do about it? That's really the heart of the matter. Where does the knight want to go after e5? It wants to go to d5, right? Can't go to d5 now because, well, it loses.
Could you look back home to e6?
You could. That's the alternative. Okay, so let's say I go e6. And first of all, not very happy with that move. It does achieve control of d5, but at a cost. You can just, to my mind, it weakens the dark squares, and that might be too abstract, but the knight's no longer protected. And for example, after e5, knight b5, I probably take it, but knight e4 is also interesting, or even just d4, and there's a big weakness on f6. So I'm not too comfortable with that. But I did consider it. c6 likewise, the knight on b8 starts to grumble, doesn't have anywhere to go. So c6 doesn't make much sense. So I want to control d5. So then bishop moves become the issue. Moving the bishop on d7 so the queen controls d5, right? So bishop g4 maybe, but then e5. And what happens? If knight d5, queen e4, double attack on the knight and the queen. Bishop takes f3 is forced, queen takes, and then white has quite a big advantage. The two bishops and a bit more space. If you go to e6, it's a bit clumsy. White will probably just carry on with d4. I'll just show that line, because that's actually the one that's probably the most conventional, if you like. And it looks like black's been successful. Attacks the queen, takes, and it seems, well, he's stopped white castling. But just wake up and look at the, not wake up, but if you come to, or he plays that sequence of moves and kind of come to, you realise that your position's actually quite bad as black here. The queen side's very weak. The king isn't that badly inconvenienced. I'm going to go g3 and king g2, and that's fine. And the center is sort of very strong, very easy to support. So that doesn't really help that much. Which brings us, I'm sorry, to bishop c6. Would be another sensible move. It looks a bit more meaningful than bishop c8, a bit more useful. You're attacking e4 and you're threatening d4. But it's also a bit clumsy. By going to c6, you can no longer go to g4. You're also blocking the knight on b8 and blocking the opponent on c7. So it's got a sort of stodgy, slightly ugly feel to it. And white could either go d3 and play positionally, or you could try maybe go a3 and then d4. And I just didn't like black's position very much. d4 comes, d5 is threatened, bishop comes out, maybe castles queenside, or maybe just queen c2 and bishop e2 or something like that. But I didn't think it was a very dynamic setup. Bishop c, on the other hand, I think is the best move. But how on earth do you begin to explain that? Well, in the book I speak about white's advantages, the initiative, the fact that there's something called serve and volley chess, where you just sort of play a very aggressive opening and then not be going out with a string of tactics. That happens quite a lot. So what does black have to compensate for that? Well, he usually has a certain amount of information. He usually gets, there's a childish joke that most people have heard by Suba. You all know Suba's joke? No, okay. Well, Suba's joke is, say a number, any number. So who's going to be the victim? And who wants to say a number?
86.
86, great. 87, I win. Okay. And this is the heart of Suba's joke. You use the information against the person. So whatever you say, I say one higher. And there's something of that in chess. Suba maybe pushes it too much. But in chess, white's movements do give you a certain amount of information. And if your position is sufficiently flexible, if it has what Suba calls potential, and he means potential in a fairly technical sense that I try and unpack a bit in the book, then you can use the information to your advantage, sometimes even fully compensate and more for the initiative. So the initiative comes at some cost, because that you're telling black where your pieces are and moreover what they're limited to doing. So the queen on e2 is quite a venomous creature at the moment because of the queen's placement, e5 and knight g5 and queen f3, and all these things are in the air. But equally, we've got information that the queen doesn't have anywhere comfortable to go anytime soon. The bishop's going to struggle to develop. And because of that, normally when you feel the pinch with black about developing quickly, you can tell that, well, maybe white is going to have development problems too. So it will take quite a while for white to get organized. So that's why we can think of this sort of paradoxical move. You sort of improve your development by undeveloping. The bishop on c8 is much better on d7. As was the case on d7, it can still go to g4, which can be very useful to pin the knight later. But it can also be great to go to b7 to attack e4. By far the most important feature is just that it allows the queen to control d5. But the point of this move is just that it maximizes potential. Now this is quite an abstract concept that I try and make a bit more concrete in the book. But I think success with black is about keeping a lot of potential in your position. And that usually means being as flexible as possible so that when you can read white's position, you can sort of see through the initiative and make the most of your own chances against it. But to do that, you have to keep a lot of potential, which is what bishop c8 is all about. And actually, it stops white's initiative in its tracks. There isn't really any way white can move up a gear now. He's kind of stuck, which seems a bit strange because white doesn't seem to have done that much wrong. But what he has done is something a bit peculiar and a bit pointed. But it's kind of single pointed. It's pointed at e5 and knight g5. And if you sidestep that, there's not much left. So white has to change gears and do something entirely different. Stuart tried to carry on with the sort of thematic moves, but now, rather than having to go somewhere ugly like h5 or g4 and kick back to the h file, or g8 or d7 when e6 comes, I've got this healthy square because my bishop's made way for it. And while at the same time my bishop isn't anywhere awkward like g4, as I mentioned, it was on g4 now white would play queen e4. It was, so I'm quite comfortable here, basically. So Stuart played knight g5. He's trying to make sense of this sort of setup. He's trying to make something of the initiative he thought he had. But it burns out quite quickly. I play e6, and quite crucially I'm attacking this knight now. So he can't play queen f3 and just take his knight off. So he could go back to e4 or f3 now, but he plays d4, which is quite sensible. And now quite a good move, fairly unconventional move. Normal would be bishop g7, because that's where you normally go once you play g6, right? But the problem is that I don't control c5 then, and I also don't attack the knight. So it gives white time to do things like maybe h4, h5, or it gives white time to maybe play knight ce4 and control c5, or queen f3 again could be awkward. Lots of moves of bishop here. So bishop e7, and Stuart played h4, the main point of which is the first move go h6 to get rid of this annoying knight. And he comes back to f3. I mentioned in the game the alternatives of knight e4 and stuff. And now the annoying thing for me is it's difficult to castle because h6 hangs. That was the main point of white going h4. So then bishop b7, he has to get his bishop out now. So g3 happened, knight d7, bishop g2, c5, and black's completely equalized. White actually has to be a bit careful here not to be worse. But he took this, I damaged the structure. I took back, very comfortable position now. Castles, and this is the last round, so there's issues of prize money and whatnot. And also, you know, it's taking me some time to find these moves. You know, they're not all very obvious.
Why didn't you take the bishop?
Why would you want to?
Well, it just looks quite strong.
Well, your play is really on the queen side. Yeah, the knight on c5 has a lot of what the Russians call perspective. You can go to a4, it controls e4, d3. Bishop's still kind of needed for the king side to control f6. And especially because the next move possible, I take queen d3 now, which removes any danger. And I actually thought I might be a bit better here, but when I thought about it, I realized I wasn't better. And because of the tournament situation, I often draw. But if he takes on d3 and plays a4, it's actually, it's going to be a draw quite quickly probably, because it's very likely the queen side will be liquidated. So that's in the third part of the book about the opening stuff. And as you see, quite a lot of examples with strange moves that become less strange after a bit of explanation. And so yeah, that's sort of intro synopsis of the book in about an hour. And you're welcome to ask me anything you want.
Did you find that over the wall over c1?
Bishop c8.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, I did actually. Yeah. It's completely, because I'd never seen queen e2 before. And bishop c8 actually, I don't know why, but it was pretty intuitive for me. Like I mean, you know, it's a bit of self-congratulation, but for some reason I found the move quite easily. Because I didn't have that dogma, you know, somehow, I didn't have the stuff about development and going backwards and none of that. It was just, what's the best move?
But E5 is also such a huge threat, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you have to deal with that threat. I think you could possibly find it.
That's right.
You didn't possess your intuition.
Yeah.
Just fear, actually. I think I'd be so afraid of E5.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to give you an example of the text of the book. It's probably a good example of to show you. So, bishop c8, I say, if you can all remember the position, I hope to set it up again, yeah? Bishop c8, a powerful and paradoxical move. It is powerful because it takes the sting out of white's idea of playing e5, increases the queen's control over d4, and increases black's options. For example, bishop b7 and bishop g4 are both still possible. The move is paradoxical because black's problems seem to stem from his lack of development, and superficially this retreat to the back rank just makes them worse. However, the move is a good illustration of the kind of thinking black needs to keep the initiative under control. Queen e2 is a very tricky move that is also artificial and compromises the coordination of white's position considerably. This means that if white cannot use his current configuration to make something of the initiative, he will need to take time to reorganize his position, and during that time black will catch up in development and start to cause problems. Moreover, bishop c8 is not as difficult to find as you might think. If you look at the position without prejudice, and this issue of prejudice is very much in the book, and if you look at the word prejudice, break it up, it's prejudge. And that's what a lot of people do in chess to their detriment. They prejudge things before they really look at what's happening. If you look at the position without prejudice, you find that it arises from the needs of the position. Black definitely needs to meet e5 with knight e5, otherwise he will be pushed back and lose coordination. Playing e6 or c6 uses precious time and further weakens the black position. Therefore, in order to make knight b5 possible, the bishop needs to move from d7. But where should it go? If it goes to c6, the c pawn is hampered and the b8 knight grumbles. After bishop c6, I give some variations, chat, chat, chat. If it goes to e6, it goes some variations, chat, chat, chat. If it goes to g4, chat, chat, chat. Therefore, as Sherlock Holmes once put it, once you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. You've heard that before, right? Pause for effects. I thought you'd all heard it. And that's true of bishop c8. So it's not, when you start to look deeply at chess, it's a wonderful feeling when the sort of reality and truth of chess meets with your prejudices and like leaves them, embattered on the roads. Because, really, that's what proof is about. It's about seeing into your own prejudices, seeing into your own assumptions, and trying to break them down. And the only way you can really do that is by thinking hard about positions and then trying to retrace your thoughts, honestly. Because it's very hard, the honestly is very important. It's very hard to be honest with yourself, because it's quite painful. You often are saying to yourself, look, I'm not as good as I thought I was. And that's only that, and that's where I forget who said it now, but only a strong player knows how weak he really is. Like, it's one of the best chess quotations ever. And I also mentioned somewhere in the book that as a rule of thumb, the stronger the player, the more likely they are to say, I don't know, when you ask them what's happening in the position. And that wasn't just a kind of joke, but there really is a lot in that. Stronger players are skeptical thinkers. They have very few dogmas, very few hard and fast rules. They're trying to work the position out on its own terms. And in that sense, they've seen into chess more deeply. They've seen that chess, they love it because it's a bit beyond them. It will always be a bit beyond them. And once you realise that, the room is open to kind of really improve. But anyway, I've talked enough.